Thank you, Jim. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce someone whose career spanned continents, industries, and disciplines, Mr. David Axson. Born and raised in the market town of Congleton. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Congleton, yeah.
Wow. I didn't quite say it the way you did. Nestled between Manchester and Stoke-on-Trent in Cheshire, England, David began his journey with a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and Computer Science from Leeds University in 1983. His early career took shape in London, where he worked at A.T. Kearney, Deloitte, Haskins & Sells, and Lloyds Bank. And at A.T. Kearney's financial service practice, David specialized in trading and accounting systems, serving clients across Belgium, Finland, Italy, Malaysia, Spain, Switzerland, Thailand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. A truly global footprint. Then came a pivotal moment in 1991. David co-founded the Hackett Group and relocated from London to Cleveland, Ohio. Over the next 6 years, he helped lead this firm from a startup to a successful initial public offering, or IPO, and hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that later. As head of the consulting business, he pioneered benchmarking for practices in IT, planning, SG&A, which is selling general and administrative expenses, human resources, and played a key role in the management team that took the company public in 1998. In 2004, David became president of the Sonax Group, advising major global companies on strategy, planning, financing, and operations. During this time, he also authored 3 acclaimed books: Best Practices in Planning and Performance Management.
I acclaim them.
I had it going.
I love it. You're hired.
Best Practices in Planning and Performance Management, Half the World Away, and Management Mythbuster, and delivered more than 200 keynote speeches in over 40 countries. Fast forward to 2025, David has embraced a new chapter, now fully retired. He fulfilled a lifelong dream with the publication of his first fictional novel, False Flag, capping off a remarkable 40-year career in business. Since 1985, David has shared his journey with his wife, Donna, who's with us today, and together they've raised 2 children. Please join me in welcoming David, a visionary leader, global advisor, and now a published novelist.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm not sure if it was the food or me that attracted you to this session, but I don't really care, so thank you for coming. This is fun for me. As James mentioned, I've had the good fortune to have a very varied career, probably because I'm not very well focused, so ADHD probably has something to do with my career path, but I've given speeches everywhere from Bogota to Beijing in my life, but never in Bath, Ohio. So this is a first. And as a 25-year resident of Bath, it's actually really, or Bath, depending upon which side of the country you come from, it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. So when James invited me to do this, I thought, well, what can I share? And I thought, well, maybe it's just the story and some of the lessons I learned on that journey. I have no idea how I ended up where I am. It was unplanned, it was episodic, and it was phenomenally exciting and tremendously fulfilling. So what I'm going to try and do over the next few minutes is just give you a sense of what happened and maybe some of the lessons that I learned. And when I was sitting down and sketching out the outline for this, it very conveniently fell into my 9 lives. So I guess I'm done, because you know I have more than 9 lives, regardless of what you are. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 9 lives I've been in. But a little bit about me, as James mentioned, I grew up in a small town in the north of England. It was a textile town, and the emphasis on the word was. The part of England where I grew up is very like the Midwest of the US. You can liken the area that Don and I grew up to the Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, blue collar, iron and steel, coal, shipbuilding. Those were the industries that powered the Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom, very much as they, about 50 years later, powered the American Revolution. Not that one, the Industrial Revolution over here. We don't talk about the American Revolution. Well, we don't celebrate the 4th of July because we don't celebrate defeat very well. And so what has really been fascinating to me to move from that environment in the United Kingdom to then making a home and bringing up a family here. We've been in Summit County since 1991. We've been in Bath since 2000. So I feel like I'm an honorary Buckeye. I have a son who is a Buckeye. He graduates from Ohio State. I also have a daughter who graduated from Michigan, but we don't talk about that right? So what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit of the story. I found out very early in life that I'm a numbers person rather than a people person. I love numbers. I have spreadsheets for everything. Some people laugh at me. I actually have a spreadsheet that records every plane flight I've ever been on. Where it started, where it landed, and the only thing that matters when you're flying is that your landings equal your takeoffs. As long as that happens, you're okay. It's the only performance metric you need to worry about. Forget on time. None of the flights I'm on are ever on time. And so I play with numbers. So I thought I'd start by just sharing a few numbers about me, maybe. There we go. I have one wife who's sitting back. We celebrated our 40th anniversary in July, so I'm very pleased about that. And as she will tell you, we've only been together for 20 of those years, because the rest of the time I was traveling. We actually had our first date 45 years ago last month, so it was actually the day before my 19th birthday. I remember it very well. We have two kids, both born in Akron, one who lives in Lakewood, just on the west side of Cleveland, and one who lives about 30. Please come.
Yes, we're looking for David Axson.
Yes, that's me.
Yeah, come on in.
Our black people are
That's good, great.
Come on in.
Come in, sit down. You're welcome.
Sorry, Daniel.
I've just started, so you haven't missed much, so feel free to ask questions. So, two kids. One lives in Lakewood, the other lives about 40 miles outside of London. She told us without any preamble that once she'd finished her master's at Michigan, she was going to go and do a PhD in London. Oh, and by the way, she'd found a job to fund it all, so being a finance guy, I was very happy with that outcome. 7 years ago she did that, and she stayed. I don't think she'll be coming back to America. In fact, she's even speaking with an English accent now, which is quite worrying. I have two passports, a British one and an American one. And depending which country I'm going into, you have to juggle to make sure that you pay the least amount in terms of penalties, in terms of visa fees, legalized bribe, should I say. Had 14 homes since I left my parents' house in 1980 to go to university. Some have been long-term, some have been short-term, but we moved around a bit. In my career, I've served over 200 different clients, from one-person organizations to the largest company in the world, the US government, the largest organization in the world. Since 1991, I've done over 3,600 plane flights. Why? Why would you do that? I think my record was 211 plane flights in a single year. So that's an average of more than 4 a week. So I spent a lot of time sitting on airplanes, and even more time, unfortunately, sitting in airports waiting for airplanes. 4.6 million miles flown, apparently. 3 million of those were on United Airlines, or Continental, its predecessor. I've been to 90 different countries. I've had the good fortune to be in all 50 states. And last year, 2 years ago actually, Donna and I completed our 7th continent when we actually hit Antarctica. There were no clients there were a lot of penguins. They seemed to take what I had to say reasonably well, so I think I'll go back and settle a business down there. Wandered through 243 different airports. And this is the one that scares the heck out of me. I spent 1,780 nights in Marriott hotels. I spent another 500 in Hilton hotels, and God knows how many in various other brands that exist around the world. When you think about that, it's 4.5 years sleeping in hotels, or not sleeping as the case may be. And I've been a mentioned bath resident for 25 years. So that's a little bit about me from a numbers standpoint. But what's the story that goes behind that? Well, to make it worth your while today, we're actually going to have a little bit of a quiz, a couple of competitions today. I'm going to give away some of my books. I've got to boost the sales somehow. So we're going to have a competition. We have prizes. As James mentioned, I've written a few books. Half the World Away is really my story of coming to America. The subtitle is America Observed, Experienced and Embraced, which I think accurately describes the journey Donna and I followed in our 34 years in America. We came here, we got very excited about it, we saw what was going on, we experienced America, and we felt like we'd been embraced by America. I'll always be English, I'm very proud to be English, I'm just not proud enough to live there anymore. But we've been embraced by America, it's been a phenomenal place to bring up our family and to make a career. This one here is the new one, this came out in May. It's actually Cold War spy fiction, sort of James Bond with a twist. Had a lot of fun writing it. In fact, the second book in the series, which is called Berlin Bitter, there's a theme, you can tell, false flag, Berlin Bitter. The third one will be called Daytime Dawn. Comes out in November. So this is Cold War spy fiction. James has actually read it and actually wrote a review of it, so it means he actually finished it as well, which is quite an achievement. And then The Management Mythbuster was a book about my experiences in management and how you can potentially apply some of those lessons. That came out in 2010 while I still had a real job. So, my first job was a shop assistant. My father owned an independent family-owned furniture business in Congleton, Cheshire in England, and he was actually the third generation owner. The business was founded in 1860 by my great-grandfather, Charles Axson. That's why it's called C. Axson and Sons. This is actually a picture from the late 1950s. That's actually my auntie's car. And my grandfather was born in this room here. My father was born in a room about half a mile up the road from that. That's what we did. We built and sold furniture. That was the family business. And during my teenage years, I did everything there. I got to work there during the summers. I was a shop assistant. I helped with deliveries. And anyone who's ever been doing them will realize that houses are fairly small. You try and navigate a sofa or a double bed up a staircase that's this wide that has 3 turns in it, and you become very good at scraping walls and mending paint. So that was really, I failed at the delivery boy. I wasn't really a very good shop assistant. I got very impatient with customers when they won't make up their minds. I still get impatient with people who can't make up their minds. But I was quite good at the numbers bit. And my dad actually had me doing all the bookkeeping for the business. That was my summer job, was keeping the accounts. And I found there was a fascination with numbers. You can tell what a business does, how well it does it, and who it does it for by looking at the numbers. The numbers are the X-ray into the soul of an organization, I always believe. And once I got that trick, it became a fascinating experience just to study the numbers and then infer what was going right and what was going wrong. And when I ran my own small business, I found the numbers were both my leading indicator of what was going to happen and the lagging measure of what had happened. And I could begin to interpret those numbers and make decisions based upon them. So I learned a lot. But one of the things I also learned is when you're a small independent business, it's very difficult to compete on price. But there are other dimensions that you can compete on. You can compete on value that may be defined by the service you give, the level of customization or personalization you offer in that service, the responsiveness. Those are areas where small businesses can outperform their larger competitors. Yes, sir.
You said customization. What was the word?
Personalization.
Personalization.
Make it specific to you. You know, if you go into a Walmart or a Sam's Club, they sell the same thing to everybody. You want it a little bit different? Forget about it. You buy what's on the shelf. You go into a small business, they're much more likely to try and understand what your specific requirements are and to develop a product or a service that meets those requirements.
Yeah.
That's how small businesses can really differentiate themselves. And I see that with a lot of the small businesses in the Bath community. I was playing golf with my neighbor last week, and he runs a small company very successfully. He's a former Goodyear engineer, but now he's in the wholesaling business. And he made a comment to me as we were playing. He said, you know, my competitors come in, and they are all focused on getting the business, but then they forget about it. They forget, and he made a very pertinent comment to me, it is far cheaper to keep a customer you've already got than find a new customer. And that's how small businesses excel. They're much better at that service component. In most big businesses, salespeople get rewarded for doing the deal. And then it's handed off to somebody else to service that customer downstream. And the salesman moves on to the next customer, the next deal. It is roughly 10 times cheaper to keep a customer you've already got than find a new customer. And yet so many of the incentive systems in large businesses are focused on getting new business rather than retaining business you already have. Those of you that are small business owners know that keeping your customers is far more important than finding new ones most of the time. You can then grow your business with your customers' business. So I learned a lot. You know, I was 18 years old in 1979 to 19 in 1980, so I'm really old. My second job The cool thing about being English is the legal drinking age is 18, not 21. 3 days after my 18th birthday, I started working as a barman in the pub. I worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights for the whole of my senior year in high school. For someone that was relatively antisocial, this was another interesting experience. Trying to deal with the public and frequently deal with an intoxicated public is an interesting challenge. I was literally 18 years old for the first year I was there. And as an 18-year-old, I was put in the situation sometimes of having to tell someone who was maybe 30 or 40 years older than me they'd had enough to drink and they should probably call a taxi and leave their car keys behind the bar. I learned very quickly that delivering bad news can sometimes be incredibly important and incredibly valuable. When I then became a consultant to businesses, I found that the ability to be able to convey bad news and bad messages in many ways was more important and more valuable than being able to deliver good news. But the best thing about my 2 years working in a pub was one of the waitresses who worked in the restaurant. And she's sitting in the back row. She was 16 years old at the time, and we went on our first date, September the 14th, 1980.
Remember a picture?
She was doomed. Yes.
Don't ask him for that, he'll show you.
Yeah. And the uniform was very interesting that she had to wear, so that was part of the attraction, I guess. But this is the pub we worked in. It's in our hometown. In fact, Donna's home, her house that she grew up in, is less than 200 yards away. So I insisted on driving her home every night. Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. So what happened after that? Well, I went to college. As James mentioned, I studied accountancy and computer science, which by luck turned out to be perfect. Data processing, as it was called in those days, was only just beginning to make its presence felt in the corporate world and the business world. And I was lucky. I studied the right thing at the right time. And the combination of knowing something about computers, not today, but back then I did, and accounting, set me up really nicely. And I can be one of those few people that can honestly say I use my degree every day of my working life. Not many people can do that. And it was incredibly valuable to have that grounding in areas that were so foundational and turned out to be increasingly important, like information technology, to running a company. So my first job when I graduated was as a banker in London. And you may have seen this building. It's called the Gherkin. It was actually opened in 2003. I guess it's supposed to look like a gherkin. It's right in the city of London. This here is a church that was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, who also designed St Paul's Cathedral in London, and is from the 16th century. And this ugly little building here is actually the Lloyds Bank office I worked in. So it was a real blot on the landscape. This building wasn't here then. In fact, the ultimate irony is this building would not have been built if the IRA hadn't blown up part of the city of London in a terrorist attack in the 1990s. And that building was actually built on the site of one of the buildings that was demolished during that terrorist attack. So, who knows? But yeah, I worked here. I was the slowest coin counter and note counter in history. I sat next to these three very attractive young ladies who were full-time at the bank while I had to do my 6 weeks on the counter. They would have queues out the door at lunchtime, and no one would be standing in front of me, which was good because it took me a long time to count out the notes and the coins. The most interesting thing though is this is a market that is about 100 yards away from here. Beautiful old Victorian vegetable market, situated now right in the centre of the city of London, the financial centre of the United Kingdom. And this here is a restaurant called Giorgio's. Only when I was working at the bank, it wasn't a restaurant. It was a public restroom. You went downstairs and the toilets were underground. Why put that picture up there? Well, the coolest project I had here was actually running the financing for the conversion of that public restroom into a restaurant. I learned more about how you create and finance and fund a small business from that one transaction than anything else I did in my time as a banker. And they invited me to the launch party. The cool thing is, 40 years later, the restaurant's still in business. but I still think there's a slight smell when you do it. You just can't shake it. So I started off as a banker. Boy, was it boring. I made it for 2 years. I could not stand it. The bureaucracy, the procedures, because back in those days we didn't have computerized ledgers. We had to fill out by hand ledgers for taking a mortgage. And it was dictated what piece of the ledger entry you had to write in which colored pen. Certain things were written in blue, certain things had to be written in red, other things had to be written in green. It drove me crazy. So while I had a lot of fun, once I got outside the bank branch, I decided that was not my career path. So I decided to do something different. But first, we'll have a quiz. And which book are you going to get this time? Let's have a look. All right, you get the travel book. My experiences of America. Bath, Ohio is not the first bath or the only bath in the world. That may come as a surprise to many of you.
We get website traffic from Bath, England.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm sure
For
you
this, for Bath Business Association.
Bath, England is a beautiful historic town. If you ever get a chance to go to the UK, go visit Bath. It's usually on the route. You go to Bath, you go to York, you go to Chester, you go to Stratford-upon-Avon, you go to London. That's sort of, the standard tourist route. But in which century was Bath, England founded? Anyone has a guess?
12.
I said 15.
15th,
14.
14th, you're way
12.
too recent.
6.
Keep going,
Did I say 5th?
keep going.
First.
First, who said first?
Oh,
The Romans actually established the baths in Rome, hence its name.
that's
It is a spa town,
Thank you.
and the Romans established baths there in the 1st century AD. So it's a little older than your humble little country. Is it your 250th birthday next year?
Hey, Jenna.
Is it next
You
year?
guys paid
Yeah,
for
next
those.
year.
250th? My high school just celebrated its 350th birthday. So you've got a way to go to catch up, but you've actually done quite well, particularly since you broke away.
I don't know if they're going to make it here or not, but
So then I found a job that meant I didn't actually have to do anything and wasn't held accountable for anything. I became a management consultant. The joke on management consultants is they borrow your watch to tell you the time, because they don't really contribute anything. I managed to get away with it for nearly 40 years. As James mentioned, I started off at Deloitte Haskins & Sells. This is actually St Paul's Cathedral. And this is where my office was. Unfortunately, they blew this one up, not in a terrorist attack. They just demolished it and built a new building about 25 years ago. But my office window was there. And I used to walk through St Paul's Churchyard to get to my office every morning. So that was a very cool experience. I then moved on to A.T. Kearney, which is actually an American consulting firm. They're now called Kearney, their headquarters in Chicago. This is their London office, just outside Victoria Station, so that's on the western side of London. And then I ended my consulting career with Accenture. And that's actually the Accenture office in downtown Cleveland. It's in the flats, right by is it the Detroit Bridge? Is that
Yeah.
the Detroit Bridge? Right next to the Detroit Bridge. So it's an old warehouse that was converted, and the Accenture office is on that floor. Management consulting was perfect for me. It was like going to business school without going to business school. I don't have an MBA. When we were growing up in England, we used to think that MBA stood for must have been to America. Because Americans had MBAs, but no one else did. It's not quite that true now. I had a 30 to 35 year MBA. Every client was a case study. I got to work with some really boring companies, but also some really cool companies. I did some work for Lockheed Martin and spent a pleasant afternoon watching F-14 fighter jets doing aerobatics over the Fort Worth, Texas factory. I got to go around car plants in 5 different countries around the world. I got to fly on an airline as they were testing out their new first class cabin and let me be one of the people that tested it. It was fun. Every project was different. Every case study was different. Every 12 to 16 weeks, I added a new chapter. What did I learn? Well, I learned that being a consultant was really interesting because telling the client what they want to hear wasn't going to get you very far, even though that may be why you were hired in the first place. And I very quickly, one of my mentors told me very early on that when you're a business advisor, sometimes it's better to be provocative than right. sometimes it's better to actually provoke a reaction from your client so that they articulate why they want to do what they want to do. It increases their self-confidence, and it puts them in a position where they can begin to explain to other people why they want to borrow the money, why they want to launch a new product, why they want to husband resources from another part of the business in order to launch a new venture. So that was interesting to me. The most interesting thing I learned as a consultant was the most important thing is not the answers you give, but the questions you ask. And that took me a long time, because in the early days in consulting, you were measured based upon your contribution, what you said. And I fairly learned, and when I was sitting next to the more senior and experienced and seasoned people I was working with, I realized that it was the questions they asked our clients, be it a small startup business or General Electric. You know, I did get to interview Jack Welch and Bill Gates and various other people like that during my career. Far be it from me to be arrogant enough to try and tell them how to run their companies. But what I could do is ask them questions that help them think through particular challenges or issues that they had today. I liken it a little bit to what a good family doctor does. They ask you questions about how you feel, what you want to do differently, what's an impediment in your life. And then they work with you to develop a plan or a program to try and do that. And that's what I spent 35 years doing. Was I successful all the time? No. But like, you know, what is it in baseball? You only have to be successful 25% of the time if you're a batsman to make a boatload of money. Well, I didn't make a boatload of money, I made enough. And I was right, probably a little more than 25% of the time. But the diversity of experience was phenomenal. The ability to be able to sit down with people. And I always remembered, whenever I went in and sat with a client, whoever they were, I always reminded myself, they're paying me to sit here and drink their coffee. I better do something worthwhile to justify their trust. And it's like any profession. If you're a good lawyer, if you're a good accountant, if you're good at any job, your ability to understand how the person sitting across the table, or that you're doing the job for, values what you're trying to accomplish, is absolutely key to success. And it was fun. London was a great place to be in the mid-1980s. We had a blast. It was time to move when we came over to America. We decided we wanted to experience. I'd done a little bit of overseas travel in the 1980s. As James mentioned, you know, I got to spend some time in Malaysia and Thailand. And when I was in Thailand in the 80s, hardly anyone else spoke English. I don't speak another language. Well, I speak English, American, Canadian, and Australian, but that's about it. I would have someone translating for me. And every meeting I had would take around 3 hours, because I'd ask a question, it would be translated. The client would answer the question, it would be translated. And we went through that process, 8 hours a day for days on end. It was very hard. One of the most eye-opening experiences for me is I went back to Thailand in 2009, so roughly 25 years after I'd previously been there. Gave a speech to 400 people, and they didn't even offer translation. Everyone listened to me in English. It was amazing how the world had changed. And I've had that experience in many countries around the world. The areas that are hardest, if you're a native English speaker, to do business are still Japan and Korea. China's easier than Japan or Korea. The instance of English speaking is much higher in China than it is in Japan and Korea. And in South America, where Spanish still predominates. And I don't speak any Spanish. But we were told certain things about cultural norms. In Asian cultures, if you want to make an important point, you actually speak more quietly. Because then people have to listen to you harder. And they know in their culture that means it's important. Very different to a Western culture, very different to an American culture, where the more important something is, the more we shout. You only have to listen to sports commentators. The volume goes up, the nearer the touchdown becomes. So that was very interesting. I was also taught that when I was doing presentations like this to an audience in Asia, stand as far back away from them as you can get. A, respect that person's space. But B, most Westerners are physically more imposing than the average Asian. and I'm tall and I'm fat. So if I come and lean over the top of you like this, it can be pretty uncomfortable. Not for this guy. And so I basically spent my whole time pinned back against the wall. This is what I enjoyed about the job, learning those differences, learning those nuances, and seeing how I could apply them. So this was a career that lasted, 34 years. I did some other things in between, so I'll share some of the things that happened along the way. Anyone have any questions so far?
You said 34 years in banking?
Management consulting. I was only in banking for 2 years. I could only stomach it for 2 years. I ran out of red-colored ink in my pen. This is my story in America. We moved to America in 1991. In fact, I moved ahead of Donna because we needed to make sure we had some money so I could call her and tell her to come over. I quit a job in England, bought a one-way plane ticket in America to join a 3-person company in Hudson, Ohio. Not that far away. In fact, this was our office. It's just off Main Street, just along from where the Saywell's drugstore used to be, if you remember, old Hudson Main Street. That's where we started the company. In this little office here, this was actually my office, this one here. We had another office here, and the main office there, and there were 3 of us. And we started off working with companies to collect their data so that we can compare them to other businesses, a business that we call benchmarking. So we would work out how much it costs an organization to deliver human resources to its employees, or to deliver the full portfolio of finance services, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, closing the books, tax, treasury, internal audit, all of those different activities. And we were really the first organization to create credible metrics that allowed for comparability across organizations. And we obviously had something that worked, because we started with 3 people in 1991. And in 1998, we did an IPO on the Nasdaq stock market, and we had 3,000 people. Now, there were a lot of mergers and acquisitions that went into that to create the Hackett Group. Greg Hackett used to be a Bath resident. He grew up in Massillon, Ohio. That's why I ended up moving to Hudson, Ohio, because that's where we founded the business. It was his idea. He now lives in Broadview Heights. We founded the company in 91. We took it public in 98. It is still public. This was the stock price around $20 a share last week. This is the stock price trajectory since we went public. And you can see in this little period, it got up to well over $50 a share. And that was when dot-com companies were ridiculously valued. 1998, 1999. We got caught up in that dot-com wave. Unfortunately, all the shares I got when we went public, I wasn't allowed to sell for 3 years. Guess where the share price was after 3 years? If it had been here, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I'd be on a beach somewhere, because I could have retired at that point. It actually collapsed and was below $1 a share. We almost got delisted from NASDAQ. Because if you have a stock price that languishes at those depths for long enough, they say you're no longer a viable entity. But to be fair, I left in 2003, but you can see the company's still in business. And it was a phenomenal experience to go from 3 people to 3,000 people in 6 years. What did I learn? You have to do a lot yourself. We used to go in it, and well, Donna used to come with me. We would go in at the weekends and we would clean the toilets. We would empty the rubbish bins, so we didn't have to pay for an office cleaner. I would go and see my clients, CFOs of Fortune 500 companies. I would go and see the CFO on a Friday afternoon at the end of the month and say, can you please cut us a check so we can make payroll, please? And I've flown back from New York, Chicago, San Francisco with checks in my pocket that we could then deposit so we can make payroll. You have to do everything. Those of you that run your own businesses know that only too well. Unfortunately, when it came to the physical aspects of maintaining our facilities, I proved incompetent at using power tools. Every time I used an electric screwdriver or a drill, I ended up in the ER. So I'm actually banned from using anything that has a power cord associated with it. I leave that to my wife.
Don't even give him a screwdriver.
No, I am practically incompetent in so many ways. The interesting thing I learned here, one of the keys to our ability to grow is we learned that our clients and our customers were our sales force. Any small business person knows that. The best source of new business is referrals from existing customers. And again, too many organizations don't spend enough time on it. They'd rather put ads on billboards or run pop-up ads on their web pages rather than work out how do we enable our existing customers to sell on our behalf. The most interesting story is very early in the existence of the Hackett Group, when we were still trying to prove our credibility, I went and met with the CFO of Pepsi-Cola in their headquarters in Connecticut, just north of New York City, or White Plains, I guess it's technically in New York State. And he was very interested in what we were talking about. He was very open and honest. He said, "You're not credible to us at the moment. Come back in a few years." Well, 7 years later, I didn't have to come back. He actually called me and said, "We're ready now. Oh, and by the way, I gave your name to the CFOs of 4 of our subsidiary companies. They will be calling you as well." I had never anticipated that one 90-minute meeting would 7 years later result in 5 new clients. Another lesson. Every opportunity, even a failed sales call, is an opportunity to establish credibility and build a relationship that may come back and deliver some value at some point in the future. It was really cool. We had a lot of fun. But it was a lot of hard work. That's why I was doing 200 plane flights a year. You know, I was working 6.5 days a week. And we just had 2 children. And Donna tells me frequently that the kids used to stand in the garden when a plane flew over and wave and say, "Hello, Daddy." So those Sunday evening flights were the worst. Going to the Cleveland airport on a Sunday evening, knowing I won't be back until Friday night or Saturday morning, was very hard. So I'm thankful that my wife was a very good single parent for those early years. Then, I don't know what I did. I must have lost my focus. I took a job with Bank of America as head of planning down in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was a corporate executive. God, it was horrible. I hated it. Big companies are so bureaucratic. I'd only been there about 3 weeks when there was this knock at the door. And I opened the door, and this man outside, he had a trolley, and it had pictures on it, paintings on it. And I said, "Okay, what do you," he said, he wheeled the trolley into my office. He said, "Which pictures would you like on your walls?" Well, no one's ever asked me what pictures I want on my walls. So I picked out 3 pictures, and he looked most concerned. He said, "Oh, sorry, you're only an executive vice president. You need to be a senior vice president to have 3 pictures. You're only allowed 2." I knew that was the beginning of the end. But I learned a lot. I was actually in this building in Charlotte, North Carolina. The NBA arena is just around the corner from here. I think my office was down here somewhere. Big companies have just as many problems as small companies. And they're rarely able to fix them with speed and agility. But their sheer size allows them to be successful. And when I was at Bank of America, the balance sheet of the bank was $1 trillion. I'm not even sure I can remember now how many zeros go after the 1 to get to $1 trillion. I guess Elon Musk is halfway there in terms of his own personal net worth. But the numbers, we dropped the last 6 zeros because they were irrelevant. So it just looked like thousands when you were looking at the P&L and the balance sheet. It didn't really look like trillions or billions or whatever. It just all became stuff. As you can see, that didn't last very long. I made it for a couple of years. Worked out I wasn't cut out for that life. So guess what? I went to the other extreme. But first, another question. I'm guessing where I put the questions in here. Which book am I doing this time? I think I'm doing this one. We're in Bath, Ohio. How many other US states have a town or city or village called Bath?
3,
10.
No.
20.
Closer.
49.
Back the other way. It was between these two answers.
I
24.
said 10.
No. Keep going.
29.
Lower.
21.
18.
Lower.
26.
Lower than 18.
15.
Come on, Tom, you're a numbers guy.
15 is correct. There are 15 other bars
Actually,
in
thank
the
you.
United States. My books are great. They cure insomnia and they're far cheaper, they're far cheaper than a prescription to Ambien or something similar.
That's not true. You kept me awake the other night.
What made you think maybe? I don't know. I thought,
It did.
God.
I would say they're remedy.
So, I then became a business owner. I went from corporate America, $1 trillion balance sheets, 400,000 employees, to one. And this was my office. It's the Welton Barker Barn, or Barker Welton Barn. It's on White Road, right next to the bake shop. That was my office. And what did I find out about being a one-person business? It's really hard. Trying to sell and deliver at the same time is really challenging. How do you prioritize your time? The other thing that I'm sure anyone in here who's been self-employed can relate to is the admin can crush you. Whether it's licensing, taxation, workers' compensation, the bureaucracy is overwhelming if you let it. And I found I slipped, because I love numbers, I slipped in to thinking I was working productively when all I was doing was spinning my wheels doing admin and thinking about tax returns and thinking about payroll and thinking about workers' compensation. Things that actually added zero value to my business. They didn't help me find new clients. They didn't help me deliver value to those clients. But I'd get to the end of an 8-hour day and think I'd worked hard. I just hadn't worked smart. So one of the lessons I learned is don't let the admin consume you. Pick it up, do something, put it back down again, and focus on what's really important to growing a sustainable business. I managed it for 7 years, and I loved it. I actually took a significant cut in income to do this, because this is when my children were entering their teenage years. And as any parent knows, the mums are really important in the first few years, and the dads are largely irrelevant. In fact, I was disruptive to the domestic routine every time I came home, and all the rules went out of the window because Daddy was home. But I actually found that I could add some value to my kids' lives as they went into middle school and entered high school and started to think about college. And I wouldn't sacrifice those memories for anything. So it was the right thing to do at the right time. 2011 happened to coincide with my daughter's high school graduation and my son going into his junior year in high school. So I thought, okay, time to get back to work. So I did something stupid. I joined another big company. This time, with 500,000 employees, 500,000 employees, $40 billion in revenue. I joined the Cleveland office of the global firm Accenture. I actually had a global role. I managed the global CFO strategies practice, which basically means I talk to CFOs of large companies a lot of the time. I had over 200 people reporting to me in 15 different countries, most of whom did not speak English as their first language, and all of whom were at least 25 years younger than me. It was fascinating. I loved every minute of it. I had ethnic, cultural, linguistic, generational diversity. Boy, did I learn a lot. I had a young lady working for me in London who was a refugee from Syria, another one who was a refugee from Iran. I had people of every race, color, creed, whatever, sexual orientation. As a kid who grew up in a town where there was one non-white family in the north of England, it was a long journey. But boy, was it rewarding. Absolutely fascinating. I learned so much and was able to put prejudices I didn't even know I had to one side. And it really made me grateful for the opportunity to be able to tour around the world with someone else paying the bills and experience all of this. What did I learn as a global business leader? The world is getting a lot smaller. I told you the story about visiting Thailand in the 80s and again in the 2010s, and and the prevalence of English. But what I also found is the issues individuals are dealing with are much more common than we think. And that cuts across socio-political divides. I spent quite a lot of time actually working in Russia, working in Moscow. I did work in Moscow after the Soviet Union invaded Ukraine. It was really interesting because part of what we did as Accenture is we divested our whole business in Russia, which was around 2,000 people and a not insignificant revenue stream in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because we deemed it was not consistent with where we wanted to be as a company, and I was helping through that process. What this picture actually shows you, this is London. This was the cool part. The last 2 years of my time with Accenture, they sent me over to London. Well, I volunteered to go. It was like going back home to run a business that we had in London. And this is actually the view from my apartment in London. It was pretty cool. If you go about 5 yards this way, you see Tower Bridge. So I walk across Tower Bridge, past the Tower of London to go to my office, which is actually this building here. See the gherkin again that was in the picture at the very beginning when I was at Lloyd's Bank? Talk about going back to where you started. It was fascinating. This building here they call the walkie-talkie. If you're old enough to remember walkie-talkies, it looks a bit like a walkie-talkie. You know, one of those big clunky cell phones in the early days of cell phone technology. The cool thing is, up here is a sky bar. Best views in London, it's free. Unless you buy a drink. Because it's about 15 bucks for a beer in there. But if you ever go to London, go to the Sky Bar in this building on Fenchurch Street, and you'll get a phenomenal view of the City of London. It's wonderful. So that was my penultimate step in my career. Now, I had the good fortune to retire in 2019, 6 weeks before COVID hit. So I did 150 plane flights in 2019 and 0 in 2020. That took a bit of adjusting. You know, my car still wanted to get on 18 and drive to 71 and head north to the airport. It was, you know, pre-programmed to do that every Monday morning. So it was a little bit of adjustment. But since then, I found what's probably the most rewarding element. I've actually been able to take a lot of those things I learned in the first 8 phases of my life and try and bring them for benefit in our local community. I do nowhere near as much as many people, but I like to think I've been able to contribute to some of these organizations. And the role of being a volunteer, coach, advisor, telling stories, helping people understand the balance sheet, working out what a cash flow statement looks like, beginning to understand those basics that I learned back in school in 1980, you know, in Leeds, England, and have been applying every day since. It's been incredibly fulfilling. I had the good fortune, our kids were fortunate enough, we were fortunate enough to be able to allow them to go to Old Trail School. I served on the board for 10 years and was board president. In fact, there's a gentleman in the back who knows me very well from Old Trail. We were both heavily involved there. My kids then both went to Holborn. Had a phenomenal experience there, even though neither of them could play football. At the time they were there, Holborn was terrible. In fact, it was the year my son graduated that Holborn suddenly became very good at football. Until then, they lost to Walsh and St. V every single year. It was really rather depressing. They've turned it around a little bit since then. My son then went on to become a Buckeye. And the coolest thing was, in his freshman year at Ohio State, which was 2013-14, is when they won the national title. The last one until last year. And we got to go to the semi-final game down in New Orleans when they played Alabama. And you can guess who was favourite for that game, and it wasn't Ohio State. Ohio State won that game. We were an hour and a half away from Alabama. We were somewhat outnumbered, but not in vocal ferocity, I can assure you. Discover Bath Barnes James has got me involved in that. I don't know much about Barnes, but guess what? I'm the treasurer. So I look at the numbers, and the numbers aren't bad. We have more money than we've spent, so that's always a good thing. Acton Cooperative Farms is one of my favourites, a relatively recent passion. If you've never seen it, it's just off Route 8 in the North Hill community. It's actually 3 former baseball fields that have now been turned into a community farm, a cooperative farm, largely for the immigrant community in North Hill. Nepalese, Bhutanese, and they grow food and they sell food, and it gives an opportunity for the immigrants, virtually all of whom speak virtually no English, to actually practice the agricultural behaviors that they brought from their homeland. And some of the things they grow there are absolutely fascinating. They grow loofahs, which as a kid I thought was something you rub your back with in the bath. But they grow them for food. And these things are huge. And they've taken this baseball field, the city of Akron kindly donated to the charity, and are creating a sustainable agricultural environment to help people integrate into the Akron community. It's absolutely fascinating, very passionate about that. Donna and I had the good fortune to participate in the Leadership Akron program. It blew me away. I've lived in Summit County for 34 years. I've lived in Bath for 24 years. I had no idea the passion and energy people bring to charitable endeavors in our city. There are so many organizations working to help people who don't have opportunities, creating opportunities. It was mind-blowing, tremendous. I would highly recommend the programs that Leadership Akron runs, but I'd also highly recommend, for me, it was an educational experience to understand the challenges people have in our community and what we can try and do, those of us that are fortunate enough to be able to either deliver time, treasure, or talent, one of the 3 T's that these organizations are looking for. And if you can only deliver some time, it's great. If you can deliver some treasure, phenomenal. If you actually have some talent, my only talent's adding up numbers, and that's what I try and do. We can give so much back, and the energy and passion I've found has been phenomenal. The Turn is an organization based out of North Olmsted in Ohio. It actually started off as a golf-related program and has now evolved into a rehabilitation program for stroke victims, military veterans who have PTSD or have lost limbs in combat. And it's a mechanism of both fitness, partially centered around golf, but not just around golf, to really help rehabilitate people. And the fascinating thing I've learned there is it's not so much the physical disability, it's the mental disability that needs treatment. And the opportunity particularly for the veterans and for stroke victims to engage with others and to have others engage with them is often more valuable than the physical benefits of the exercise program or being outside in the fresh air. And it's been a really fascinating and fulfilling experience for me. That's sort of my story. I know there isn't a 10th life, but hopefully there are a few more things that I get to add here. I've been very fortunate, I make no mistake about it. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I should have been the 4th generation to run that furniture business. But my father told me during those summers working in the back office there, you're not doing this. My father never wanted to run the business. He was in the British Army just after World War II, and his father died while he was in the army. So he had to come home and take over the family business and give up a place at university, which gave me the opportunity to be the first in my family. Donna was the first in her family to go to college. And we were very grateful and fortunate that we had parents who were supportive of those objectives and goals. All I can say is I'm very grateful and fortunate to the people of Bath, Ohio for putting up with us for the last 24 years. I don't think we're going anywhere. This is our home, this is where our family is, and this is where our friends are. Hopefully I did 2 things. I always said, you don't just speak, it's about edutainment. What's edutainment? It's a combination of education and entertainment. So hopefully you learn 1 thing, maybe 2. Hopefully I made you smile a couple of times. That was my objective. If I did those 2 things, I'm happy. Hopefully you're happy. Thank you for your time.
We've got a couple minutes for questions, but if someone has to leave, because it's...
Well, he's got a question for us. He's got another book. to
I
read.
know. That was the denouement, but I was going to take questions first if anyone has any.
Right. Anyone got any questions?
Yes, sir.
Like, how do you deal with, like, systemic racism? Like, what do you think about that concept? Like, my younger brother is fresh out of a welding program out of college. He wants to start a welding business.
Right.
Like, you know, you talked about when you started your business, you had to do everything, administrative upkeep, you had to do a lot of groundwork, every aspect. For a minority that not only has to burden that administrative burden, but also burden the racial burden.
Yeah.
Does it exist to you, and what is your advice?
Of course it does. Be naive to it. You know, I never had to experience it. I'm a white guy who was brought up in a loving home and given every advantage. I took most of those advantages. I can't relate to the personal experience that you guys lived to. But what I can do is say that in people I've seen in similar situations, think about asking for help. Look at the network. There are far more people out there who want to help you than want to harm you. I genuinely believe that. Part of the challenge is, what is that network? I was very fortunate early in my career to have some great mentors.
Great mentors.
People who were willing to educate me, to stop me making mistakes. You can find great mentors. You know, he's got a great brother to start with. You brought him here today. You're asking questions on his behalf. That helps. Family's the number one. But think about that network that you can build. I mentioned just a minute ago about all the organizations in the Akron area who are working to try and help people overcome some of those barriers.
The thing is, like, we get a lot of general direction, and it's like, if you called, like, you would make traction. If he calls, he's diverted indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
How do we navigate the systemic institutional racial barriers when he calls the exact same advice that everyone in this room attempts, and he gets a different response?
If I knew the answer to that question, I probably wouldn't be standing here, because I would be having a much bigger impact in the world than I am. I don't know. All I can say is you have to keep trying and keep working with the network that you begin to build. There will be people who help open those doors. There will be people who don't slam it in your face. But just like anyone starting out, you're going to get more no's than you are yeses to begin with. In your situation, you may get more no's than I got. I remember going to my first interviews for jobs after I graduated from college, and people assumed I went to private school and I'd gone to either Oxford or Cambridge, the top two universities in the United Kingdom. I didn't do those things. I went public schools and public university. It was trivial compared to what you guys have to put up with. But I sat there thinking, I don't belong. These people aren't interested in who I am and where I come from. And, that's 1% of what you guys have to deal with. But thinking about, how do I connect with people who can help break down? And the hard part is to synthesize and to separate those that are just talking to you versus those who will actually do something on your behalf.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Last question.
Trial and error.
Last question. I'm sorry, everybody.
It's all right.
Apologize. Will you mentor him?
We can talk about that. I don't know if I'm the right person.
Can I get your contact? No, seriously,
Push,
man.
yeah.
Seriously, man. Your knowledge is like a complete ocean compared to us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd be very
God
lucky.
bless you, brother. God bless you.
Any other questions?
For one final quiz. Any other questions? Final quiz question. There's a lot of publicly available data that can help you succeed in business. I find a lot of small business people don't take advantage of that. So here's an example. According to the 2023 American Community Service, what is the median household income in Bath?
100,000.
238.
164.
280.
58,000.
Yeah.
Just listen to the diversity in those responses. This is publicly available data. If you're running a business in Bath, Ohio, and you don't know this information, you're missing a huge opportunity. Oh, and by the way, you can find out exactly how many people in Bath Township file tax returns with a adjusted gross income at every band level. Publicly available information. You want to know how many people in Bath make over 100,000? It's publicly available information. You want to know how many people make under 50,000? It's publicly available information.
What's the answer?
161,000.
161,409.
161.
See? It's at his fingertips. He went and
I
did it.
should have closed the app that way. You didn't
So David, thank you for your time. You gave us some insight into a diverse background. well-traveled, and very unusual leadership experiences. I wrote down a couple nuggets. I'll end with that, and then we can call it a day. First one was, if you want better answers, ask better questions, right? The X-ray into your organization are the numbers, the leading numbers and the lagging numbers. Number 3, services is your value proposition as a small business, not necessarily price. Your client is your best sales force. Fix problems with speed and agility. Small businesses, compared to big businesses, can fix problems with speed and agility. The world is getting smaller. We have the same challenges, but you need to collaborate and communicate to solve them. And then finally, in this stage in your life, purpose and services, my skills and experience can be used to help others. Those are the nuggets that I took away from today's event. I appreciate everyone's time and focus, especially David and Donna, for being here today. And one more round of applause for Mr. David. So she's welding.